This story is inspired from a true incident which happened in Philadelphia when a thief stole a shop vacuum filled with hornets. More about the incident after the story. My neighbor, Harold, had a knack for borrowing things and never returning them. It started with small items, garden shears, a broom, an old hatchet, and escalated over the years to more personal belongings, like a pressure washer and even some of my daughter's toys. No matter what I did, Harold always slipped out of responsibility, claiming he'd found the items or insisting that he had every intention of giving them back. Time and time again, I was left shaking my head in frustration. I lived on the outskirts of a quiet town, and my house was right next to Harold's. It was an older neighborhood, marked by winding roads and spacious lawns. Most people there were friendly, except Harold. He kept to himself. That is, unless he wanted something. My friend and coworker Carla often joked that he had the eyes of a raven, swooping down to pick out shiny trinkets whenever he pleased. One afternoon, after I discovered my mail had been tampered with, I had a conversation with Carla in my kitchen. She was leaning against the counter sipping coffee, and I could see the anger in her eyes on my behalf. "I can't believe he's done it again," she said, setting her mug down with a thud. "It's like he thinks nobody can touch him." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "He's so sly about it. He always does it when I'm not home, and if I say anything, he just denies it." Carla narrowed her eyes. "You need to teach him a lesson." She wasn't the first person to tell me that, but she was the first whose words lit a spark in me. "Maybe you're right," I replied, staring off into space. It was around this time that I ended up with a nest of European hornets in my attic. The sight had terrified me, huge menacing insects buzzing around in a growing hive. I called an exterminator, and after the job was done, I was left with a vacuum canister full of very angry, albeit momentarily sedated hornets. Carla visited me while the exterminator was finishing, standing a few feet away for safety. "You better be careful with that," she said, pointing at the shop vac the exterminator had handed me. "I'd take them far away to dispose of them." Later that evening, I devised my plan. I cleaned out my old shop vacuum and carefully transferred the hornets into it. They were still sluggish from the chemicals, but I knew they wouldn't stay that way forever. As I sealed the vacuum, I laughed under my breath, imagining Harold's face when he got more than he bargained for. I kept the shop vac at the edge of my garage for a couple of days, knowing Harold's sticky fingers would start itching the moment he saw something new or expensive looking left unattended. Sure enough, I noticed muddy footprints by my garage door on the second night. He was testing the waters, seeing if I was oblivious or careless. If only he knew. Then I made my move. I placed the vacuum, my gift, in plain sight by the trash bins, right by the sidewalk. It was nighttime, nearly midnight, when I snuck over and placed it near Harold's driveway instead of my own. I hovered in the shadows, my heart pounding with anticipation. For a moment, I questioned if I was going too far. But Harold made my life miserable for years. I was done turning the other cheek. I didn't have to wait long. Around 1 a.m., I heard a rustle near the bins. I peeked out my window and saw Harold's silhouette, hunched over as he inspected the vacuum. The faint glow of a street lamp revealed his expression, one of greedy delight. He grabbed the handle and walked back to his shed, making minimal noise. It was almost impressive how stealthy he was. The next morning, I acted as though everything was normal. I worked from home that day, answering calls and sending emails. Around noon, I heard a commotion coming from Harold's backyard. I rushed to my window, peering through a gap in the curtains. What I saw made my heart race with a perverse satisfaction. He stumbled onto the grass, yowling in pain, smacking at his face and arms as the enraged insect stung him repeatedly. A small part of me wanted to run over and help, But then I thought of all the lies he told, all the times he'd stolen without a shred of remorse. My better sense won out, though. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, feigning ignorance to protect my own skin. When the police and paramedics arrived, I observed from my porch, molding my face into an expression of shock and concern. I had to make sure no suspicion fell on me, so I did what any concerned neighbor would do. I rushed over, pretending I had no clue what was happening. "What on earth happened?" I asked in a trembling voice. I saw Harold lying on a gurney, his face swollen and blotchy, eyes barely open. An officer, whose name tag read Officer Brooks, turned to me. "You got into a nest of hornets somehow." Then he paused, noticing I was looking at the old shop vac spilled on the lawn, with angry insects still buzzing around it. "Do you know anything about that vacuum?" he asked. I shook my head. I didn't even know he had one. Was that in his shed? "It appears so," Officer Brooks said, glancing at Harold's groaning form. "He's in rough shape. He'll be fine in a couple days. But those stings are going to hurt." I looked back at the vacuum, feigning surprise. I used to have one just like that. But someone stole it from me. The officer's eyebrows rose. "Stole it?" "Yes, I actually wanted to report it. I noticed it went missing from my garage a while back. I thought maybe I'd misplaced it, but I'm pretty sure it was stolen now." I forced a shaky laugh, as though I was both embarrassed and angered by my carelessness. "I'm glad you're here, officer, because I was actually going to file a report this afternoon. It's probably nothing, but this might be a coincidence or it might be something bigger. You never know." He nodded. "We'll certainly look into it. We'll ask Harold how he came across the vacuum once he's in better shape." Later that day, Carla came over, barely containing her grin when I told her the story. We had a tense moment, though, as I confessed how I might have gone too far. She shrugged nonchalantly. "You gave him a taste of his own medicine," she said. Carla and I celebrated quietly that evening, sipping on wine in my living room. In September 2023, in the Frankfurt section of Northeast Philadelphia, a thief unwittingly stole a shop vacuum filled with hornets, setting the stage for an unexpected and painful surprise. The vacuum belonged to Don Shump, owner of the Philadelphia Bee Company, who had just completed a European hornet removal job. He had left the shop vac in the bed of his truck, but before he could safely handle the agitated insects, it was stolen. Unaware of its dangerous contents, the thief risked opening the lid, potentially unleashing hundreds of furious hornets. Reflecting on the situation, Shump remarked, "Better they trickle out slowly than all at once." The story is inspired from a true incident which happened in the year 2006 in Florida. More details about it after the story. I moved to a nice suburb outside of San Diego. Right away, I became friends with my new neighbor, Cindy. She was a wonderful woman, always smiling. Cindy always checked in on me and invited me over to her place when she thought I needed company. The more I got to know her, the more I liked her. She came from a rich family, but she gave away most of her money to charities. She spent several days a week volunteering at soup kitchens and doing community projects. She'd often go out to sketchy areas in the city just to help out. I worried about her sometimes. She was a small, dainty person, and I was scared that people would take advantage of her trusting nature. I worried about her sometimes. One day, I noticed a man dressed in a black hoodie walking on our street. He kept his head down. I was watering the front yard at the time, so I got a good look at him. I couldn't see his face, though. I didn't want to come across as a Karen, so I didn't ask him what he was doing in our neighborhood. Still, I got a bad feeling from him. At first, he was walking normally, but then he started to limp, and it was obviously fake. I saw him limp towards Cindy's front door. I walked to the edge of my yard, hiding behind the hedges but close enough to hear their conversation. Cindy opened the door and asked if she could help him. I hurt my leg. Can I come inside and use your phone? No, Cindy answered. For a second, I breathed a sigh of relief. Cindy was smart enough to see through this man's act. Then my heart dropped. You look really hurt, sir. Let me get my coat and I'll drive you to the hospital myself. She disappeared back in her house, but came out 2 seconds later wearing a thick fur coat. She led the man to her car and they both got inside. I had to do something. I ran to the car just as she was starting the ignition. Cindy, what are you doing? Oh, we're just heading to the hospital. This man needs my help. Don't worry about me. I tried to convince her to stop, but she wouldn't listen. She backed out of the driveway. From the passenger seat, the man in the hoodie looked me dead in the eyes. He was smiling. I was scared for her. I knew that man was dangerous. I could feel it in my bones. I waited in my house for the longest time, looking out the window, praying that Cindy would come back. She never did. After a while, I called the hospital to ask if someone had come in with a wounded leg. But because I didn't have the man's name, the nurse wouldn't give me any information. I tried to explain the situation to her, but she kept telling me that patient information was confidential. That night, Cindy's car finally came back. I was in the kitchen at the time, so I didn't see it park. I could hear it though. I ran out my front door and saw the car in her driveway. I didn't see Cindy, but I saw a man walking very fast down the sidewalk. He was wearing Cindy's fur coat. If I called the police, the man would be long gone by the time they arrived. I knew it was dangerous, but I ran after him. Wait, please, stop! The man heard me and stopped. He waited for me to reach him. Can I help you? Where's Cindy? Ma'am, I have no idea who you're talking about. I'm just going for a walk. You can join me if you want. He started walking away from me. He rounded the corner into the park next to our street. I wanted to follow after him, but I wasn't brave enough. I let him go. Then I ran back to my house and called 911. I tried to explain everything that happened, but I was pretty frantic. I don't think they understood me. By the time an officer came to my house to take my statement, I had calmed down enough to explain myself clearly. I described the fur coat and gave my best description of the man, but it was difficult. Even though I'd seen him face to face, he didn't have any defining characteristics. The officer seemed sympathetic. She took a bunch of notes and assured me that they'd do their best to find Cindy. The next day, Cindy was declared missing. Some officers dusted her car for fingerprints, but they didn't find anything. I was losing hope that she'd ever be found. Then, a few days later, I saw the same man in the same fur coat walking in front of my house. Why was he back? Was he just messing with me? He stopped right outside my window and looked in. Who are you? What do you want? He tapped the glass, smiled at me, then left. I called the police again, but it seemed like they didn't believe me. The officer said it didn't make sense for someone to kidnap my neighbor and then come back for no reason. And honestly, she was right. It didn't make sense. But that's what happened. For the next few nights, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about poor Cindy. What had happened to her? Then, one day, I went downstairs with a really weird feeling. I didn't know why. I looked around my house, but nothing looked different. Then, I noticed something hanging on the coat rack next to my front door. It was Cindy's fur coat. Terrified, I checked all my doors, but there was no sign that anyone had broken in. I called the police one last time, but the officer seemed extremely frustrated. She basically accused me of making stuff up, claiming that I was interfering with their investigation. It's been days now. I live in constant fear that the man will come back. I changed my locks and added a new security system, but I still don't have any answers. And Cindy is still missing. On January 24th, 2006, 24-year-old Jennifer Kessie vanished from her Florida condo. She last spoke to her boyfriend Alan the night before. When she missed work, her family found her condo intact, but her phone, purse, and keys were missing. 2 days later, her car was discovered at a nearby complex. But when detectives opened the trunk of the car, Jennifer wasn't there. Eventually, surveillance showed an unidentified figure parking it, their face obscured by a fence post. Jennifer had felt uneasy around some workers at her building. A housekeeper identified a suspect, Chino, but he passed a polygraph test. In November 2019, local police came out with a dive team to search the lake where an eyewitness said the piece of carpet was dumped. The team spent 2 days searching, but they didn't find anything. Michael Toretta says that there were 10 construction workers, and one of them might have abducted her. The story is based on a true incident which happened in the year 2018 in Florida. A woman's prank took a wrong turn and got her arrested. More about the incident after the story. My name is Nancy Morrison, and I was the mastermind behind one of the most disastrous and now infamous pre-wedding shoots in recent history. When I first dreamt up the idea, it seemed perfect, romantic, and most importantly cinematic. In truth, it was inspired by the scene in Spider-Man No Way Home where Tom Holland rescues Zendaya from criminals. I thought it would be the ultimate homage to my favorite film, and something that John and I could laugh about for years to come. Whenever I joked about wanting a Bollywood-style dance routine at our wedding, he'd grimace and say, "Nancy, I'll do anything you want, but please keep the theatrics to a minimum." But my love for film and drama ran deep. I was convinced a pre-wedding photo shoot that mimicked the heart-stopping hero rescues damsel moment could add a unique flair. My best friend and unofficial wedding planner, Dominic, was the only person who knew about my plan. We spent weeks organizing the details, choosing a restaurant where I'd be attacked and hiring 2 out-of-work actors to pose as robbers, timing everything so that John's arrival would coincide with my frantic phone call for help. I told Dominic, I want it to be realistic but not dangerous, just enough adrenaline to trigger John's protective instincts. He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Sure, but you better pray he doesn't freeze up, Nancy. Last thing we need is him panicking and doing something stupid." I waved away his concerns. John might not like acting, but he's a good man. I'm sure if he thinks I'm in danger, he'll swoop in like a superhero. When the day came, I was a bundle of nerves. The restaurant had been prepped. The manager gave us permission so long as we promised not to disrupt the other customers too much. Our hired actors, Toby and Martin, were outside waiting for Dominic to give the signal. Everything was supposed to unfold seamlessly. John was home, believing I was out with Dominic picking flowers for the wedding. At precisely 6 p.m., I would call him on his cell phone, feigning panic.
"John, there are these men. They're threatening me. Please come to Rossi's Bistro on Maple Street. Hurry!"
Then, John would dash to the rescue. Someone would discreetly film the whole thing, and we'd have a thrilling clip to show off at a reception. It was a flawless plan. Inside the restaurant, I sat at a corner table, my stomach churning. I glanced at the clock, 5:58 p.m. I signaled Dominic, who then texted Toby and Martin to get ready. For a moment, I almost lost my nerve. Something felt off. Maybe it was the hush in the restaurant, or the suspicious glances from a few patrons who recognized the 2 rough-looking men lurking outside. But I ignored the gut feeling and proceeded with the script. At exactly 6 p.m., I dialed John's number. My voice shook, partially from genuine anxiety.
"John, there are these men. They're harassing me for my purse. Oh God, I'm scared. Please, can you come to Rossi's Bistro now?"
He stammered.
"What? Nancy, stay calm. I'll be there as soon as I can, okay?"
Then he hung up. My heart was pounding. I wiped sweat off my brow and gave Dominic a quick nod. That was the signal. Toby and Martin burst inside, wearing black ski masks and brandishing toy guns that looked chillingly real. Their first lines were straight from a second-rate crime show. Martin yelled,
"Give us your purse, lady, or we'll blow your head off!"
A few other diners gasped in shock, clearly unaware this was all staged. Dominic was across the room, filming with his phone discreetly, trying not to laugh at Martin's over-the-top bravado. Toby grabbed me by the arm, pressing the fake gun into my side. The manager, seeing real fear on the faces of his customers, rushed forward and shouted,
Hey, let her go!
Toby snapped at him to back off, maintaining the illusion. More than a few patrons fled, overturning chairs and sending plates crashing to the floor. In the midst of the chaos, I expected John to burst in, breathless, maybe a little terrified, but determined to help. Instead, time stretched on. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. By then, Toby and Martin were starting to look jittery. Customers were calling the police. I was about to whisper that we should abort. But then, at last, John arrived. But he wasn't alone.
Get down! Hands where I can see them!
The thunderous voice belonged to an armed officer. John stood in the doorway, ghost pale, watching the scene with wild eyes. My heart seized. John had not come alone or unarmed. He had alerted the police with claims of a violent robbery in progress. Before any of us could react, Toby and Martin dropped their toy guns and raised their hands. That was the moment I realized the severity of what I had done.
Wait, it's a setup. It was all fake. They're hired actors. The guns are toys.
One of the officers scowled at me.
Lady, this better be a joke.
I felt tears prick my eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... The police were furious. They had arrived armed to the teeth, expecting a life-threatening robbery, only to discover it was a hoax. Toby and Martin were furious too, swearing they weren't informed it might go this far. And John, he looked at me like I was a stranger.
Why would you do something this insane?
He asked later. We were both seated in the back of a cop car, giving statements to the police. I buried my face in my hands. I wanted to make a memorable pre-wedding shoot. I just thought...
You thought what? That I'd come charging in to rescue you? That I'd be some hero? Nancy, you know I hate all that. And now, look where we are.
In 2018, a dining prank at a Florida cafe turned into chaos when 22-year-old Peggy Georges texted her boyfriend, falsely claiming the restaurant was being robbed. Alarmed, her boyfriend called 911, reporting an armed robbery at Alabon Bakery, a Haitian eatery in Fort Pierce. Police, rushing with sirens blaring, arrived at the scene with weapons drawn. However, they found no crime, only Georges, who admitted the false claim was a prank. The act created a dangerous situation, risking harm to the police and the public. Georges was arrested for misuse of the 911 system, a misdemeanor, and later released from jail.
On the day I was attacked, I shouldn't have ever been at Kroger's. I should have been safe and sound in my house. There wasn't even anything in particular that I needed to buy. The only reason I went there was to get out of the house. My husband Jerry had been arrested 3 weeks ago. He was an investor who defrauded his clients. He'd swindled people out of millions of dollars, and the law had finally caught up with him. I had no idea what he was doing at the time, but his lawyer still advised me to stay away from the public for a while, because a lot of people in my town blamed me as much as they blamed my husband. I was the rich, oblivious housewife who still got to live in a mansion while so many of them were out on the street. It wasn't fair. I didn't do anything wrong, but people still hated me anyway. For 3 long weeks, I did what the lawyers said. I stayed inside and had food delivered, but one day, I was overcome with cabin fever and I needed to get out of the house. I figured that if I were just to pop into Kroger and buy some snacks and wine, that nothing bad would happen. I'd wear sunglasses and a hat so no one would recognize me. I was very wrong. As soon as I entered the store, I could feel all eyes on me. Everyone was staring. I didn't recognize anyone because I didn't have a lot of local friends, especially people in this tax bracket. But they sure recognized me. My husband had been in a few news stops, and they'd used a lot of photos with the both of us together. So I guess my face was pretty famous. And I think that the hat and sunglass combo was a bad idea. I think they just made me more conspicuous. I walked to the alcohol section, which was where I really wanted to go anyway, and I filled my cart with wine bottles. Only the expensive stuff, of course. I was minding my own business when I got to the end of the aisle. 2 older women stopped me, standing in my way and glaring at me through their thick glasses. They looked like angry librarians. "Excuse me," I said as I tried to push through, but they wouldn't move. "You're his wife," one of the women said. "I'm just here to shop," I told her. "Yeah," the other woman said. "You're shopping with the money you stole from our families." "I didn't steal anything," I said. "I had no idea my husband would—" "Shut up," the woman said. Her eyes were filled with pure hatred. I realized that the women weren't going to move, so I started backing away. But several other people were waiting on the other end of the aisle. I was blocked off from both directions. What were they going to do? They were starting to get closer. I was worried that this was going to turn into a real mob, a riot. Another shopper, a young attractive woman in a sunflower dress, pushed her way through the crowd and walked right up to me. I felt relieved. It seemed like she was trying to defuse the situation. She didn't look angry like everyone else. She smiled sympathetically at me, but when she got close enough, she spat right in my face. I had enough. This whole situation was becoming humiliating and dangerous. I left my shopping cart where it was and literally ran through the crowd before they could grab me. I just had to get out of there. I raced towards my car when I heard a man's voice shouting, "It's you!" I would have ignored him, but then I heard a terrible scream and a loud thud. I had to turn. When I looked back towards the entrance, I saw the man lying unconscious on the ground. He was right next to a ladder. I realized with horror that he was at the top of the ladder fixing some kind of electrical problem when he saw me, got distracted, and fell over. I had to run over and see if he was okay. When I got to his body, I could tell that he was dead. The fall had killed him. His head was twisted in an unnatural direction. It looked like he'd landed on his neck. "Oh God," I said. I fished out my phone to call 911 when the group of shoppers rushed through the entrance and saw me standing over the dead body. "Look," one of them said. "She killed him." Another one said, "She murdered Tony, and now she's taking pictures of his body." They had it all wrong. I didn't kill anyone, and I wasn't trying to take a picture. I was trying to call the hospital. I needed to defend myself. "Please, no, he just fell." But no one was listening. They all stood by the entrance for a long moment, exchanging looks, and then they came to the exact same conclusion. Without saying anything, they knew what they were going to do. They were going to attack me all at once. As a unit, a horrible, crazed unit, they all ran at me. I raced out of the parking lot. I realized that I was going in the opposite direction of my car, but I couldn't turn around. I had to keep running. They were getting closer and closer. I had my bicycle 3 times a week, so I was in very good shape. Much better shape than a lot of these people. Honestly, I made it to the end of the parking lot and then to the other side of the sidewalk next to our town's main street. My house was a 20-minute drive away from here, so I couldn't run all the way back. I had to find another place where I could stay and hide. I'd call the police and explain what happened, and surely they would understand. I needed protection, but where could I go? I looked around me and I saw an old yoga studio where I used to be a client, just a few minutes away. But if I could make it there and explain my situation to Nina, the owner, then maybe she could help me hide from the mob. So that's what I did. I ran as fast as I could until I made it to the yoga studio. I rushed inside, sweating and out of breath. I was so scared that these people would tear me apart if they even caught up to me. I saw a woman working the front desk, but it wasn't Nina. It was someone I'd never seen before. Hi, I said. Is Nina here? The woman looked at me for a long, silent second. I could tell she was trying to figure out who I was. Then she said, I'm the new owner. Nina lost all of her money because of your husband. I had to take over the business after she killed herself. Oh, crap. I raced out of there, back onto the street. The mob of people had grown, and they were all rushing towards me. I had to find somewhere to go. So I went around the corner of the yoga studio and made it to a dead-end alley. There was nowhere I could go except for a disgusting dumpster at the side of the alley. That was my only option. I had to hide inside and pray that no one would look. So before anyone rounded the corner, I jumped into the dumpster and slammed the lid over my head. I could hear their angry voices outside. I tried to hold my breath so they couldn't hear me. A few minutes passed, and they were gone. I ended up waiting there in filth and total darkness for 3 hours before I finally felt safe enough to leave. Sore, humiliated, and covered in garbage, I got out of the dumpster and walked back to the Kroger parking lot. I passed a lot of people on my way to the car, but no one did anything. I guess they didn't recognize me under all this filth. I got in my car and drove home. Since then, I just stayed in my house, wondering what was going to happen with my life. Even if my husband gets acquitted for what he's done, the public will never accept us again. I'll have to stay in my house forever.